Okay, I'm going to try to do a really quick video on checking used lenses that you buy or meet someone on Craigslist to purchase. How to quickly check them. Well, I have made a video on this before. It was rather long and drawn out, and obviously I'm a bit too verbose sometimes. So I'm not trying to repeat myself here, but I just want to make things really simple on checking for lenses and what to check for. One thing that you will not encounter very often, and here's one example. You hear that? Now shake the lens. Not you mean shake it like this, but now you won't encounter this on a lot of the modern autofocuses because the dual barrel outer and inner will actually rattle. So you need to differentiate that and put your thumb on both the outer and inner barrel and verify that it's lens shake. It's actually a loose element. Now this means an internal element. The spanner needs to be screwed down to fix it. But generally speaking, as far as checking, there are some really simplex things you need to look for. One, actually, outside cosmetic damage doesn't really mean anything. Obviously, it tells you how the lens was overall treated. But a lot of the issues that people have, especially on the older AI and AS lenses, they leave them out in a hot garage or car. And the intern, there's a lot of grease in here, by the way. You'll actually notice that the focus ring isn't tough, but it's just like damn tough to turn. And this is bad. Obviously, it can be taken care of. If you don't do it yourself, it's like a $90 fix. And if you're trying to save money on a lens, just return it, especially if it's on eBay. Really, the issue on eBay is who do you trust, and how do you get that sixth sense feel on who to buy the lens from. Obviously, you always need to have a flashlight ready, and first thing you need to do is a lot of people get scared. Even brand new lenses made today, you'll actually see like about 10 dust specks in them, so that's normal. So don't get afraid of seeing dust. But actually, when you shine a light through the lens and you see the dust there on the rear element, you're looking for is not just dust elements. You'll actually want to hold it off to the side and shine around here. Now I've got a filter on here that it isn't exactly that clean, but you're looking for fungus spots and haze. Haze looks exactly like you get oil splatter on your glasses, or like you have a dirty windshield on your car. It'll look like a milky white haze, and what that is particularized oil. It means that the particularized grease has migrated from the helicoil of the lens to the inner elements, and removing that is a real pain in the ass. And always want to avoid a lens that has haze issues. Typically it will not be light, it will be heavy or moderate, and you'll notice it right away. It'll just look like someone's got a very, very fine milky white haze that's all the way across the lens. Now to check for fungus, if you look closely, they'll look like white little spots. They'll actually look just like white fungus spots. You've seen black fungus like in a shower or whatever. It looks exactly the same except it's white or a slightly orangish, yellowish color. And typically if you look really closely, it'll have spidery veins on it. Now that can be killed easily with UV light, but that doesn't remove it. And actually once fungus has taken hold, what it does is it actually eats away, etches away at the glass. So that's an issue. However, I bought more than a few lenses. They'll have like a couple fungus spots, excuse me, and I've got them really cheap. And if it's on the rear element or just behind the rear element, that is an issue. But not so much an issue if it's on the inside of one of the first or second elements, because the image, the actual incoming image, as the light is columnated to be projected at the rear element, it's not an issue. So fungus on the rear element, bad. You'll actually show up as a dirty spot, like you got a really dirty sensor. And of course you have to take the lens apart to fix that. But if it's on the front element and it's just a couple tiny little dot spots, and you can get the lens really cheap, try to negotiate and get that lens, because it's not going to affect the image quality. You can kill it off really quick with UV. Now, as I told you about haze, it's just particularized grease. It's actually been particularized and actually attached itself to some of the inner elements of the lens. And you notice if someone's mistreated a lens, they've left it out in the heat or their garage, or up in the attic. Typically, if someone's got some old lenses up in the attic, it gets to be a billion degrees up in the attic, and you're sitting there turning the helicoil going, oh my god, oh my god. Now you think you can live with that, but that actually is torquing on the lens mount of your camera here, where your lens attaches. So that's actually an issue. You do not want to be owning a lens. Return it. Ask for a refund. You got eBay and PayPal protection. Obviously not from Craigslist or someplace like that, but if you're sitting there and you're actually, you know, I can get it to focus, so I might want to live with it. No, you don't want to live with that. It's going to damage your camera. That's an issue. The second most important thing, not so easy to check on this one, it is, but because the aperture blades are buried so much deeper, let me get a different lens here and remove the lens cap and stop down the aperture blades and let you have a look in here. Okay, now what you're looking for is first is a projected light into the front. Now you can actually see it here. You see those little shiny spots? That's actually grease on the aperture blades. What that does is it causes a retardation of the aperture blades when your camera goes to adjust the aperture when you take the shots. What it does is it causes a retardation of slowing, which can actually affect, especially in flash photography, how your pictures turn out. Now see if you can see it there. You can see the little, I get the flashlight in just the right spot. You can actually see the little darker spots there. Those are actually oil on the aperture blades. Now something else you want to watch for is make sure is to look back here. Look for a crinkle in the aperture blades. It'd be like a crease, like someone's creased a piece of paper. Or look for a warpage or an uneven aperture hole. If it's an uneven aperture hole, then the aperture's more than likely been, the lens has been dropped or damaged. It'll look like a very odd, instead of like a fairly circular hole like that, it'll look very odd or egg-shaped. If it's very egg-shaped like that, don't get the lens. It might last a good while longer, but the chances are that the lens has been dropped and one of the aperture blades is not springing back into place. What you want to check also is the springiness of your aperture blades. Just to stop it down to f22 or 16 or whatever it is. There's a little lever right over here in the back of the lens for opening up the aperture, and just let it go and make sure it snaps back, you know, nice and easy. Nice, great spring action. Barrel rings, focus smoothness, I've already talked about that. Check on the lens's overall condition. You know, make sure if it looks super dusty back here, you can usually check. As I said, let's take a look at this lens. Let me open up the aperture. I can't remember, I have so many lenses, how much dust this lens actually has. Be good if I turned on the flashlight, huh? I said the easiest way to examine this is you have the lens, the light off to the periphery, and you're shining it in. So this is very light dust. Some of you would think that this is moderate dust, but it's actually very light dust, especially on a 30-year-old lens like this. This is nothing. I mean, easily have, it's hard to quantify this. Like, well, how many specks is good? How many specks is bad? I mean, easily 10, 15 times as much dust as this is not a worry. It's not a concern. That's what scares most people. They shine a light through the rear element and they'll think, oh my god, there's all that dust in there, it's going to ruin my image. No, it's not. It's not. A lot of people confuse heavy dust with haze. Remember, the haze is even and milky, and of course the dust, if you look really closely, you can't necessarily see that with this video. If you look really closely, you can differentiate out the dust from the haze. The haze just looks basically like milky Vaseline has been smeared across the lens in a very light, milky fashion. Check all the elements for scratches, or typically there's a nick, and not just a scratch. You know, coating, spotchy spots on the coating line is not going to affect the image. Don't worry about that. You want to worry about it on the rear element, okay, not the front element. Not so far as air coating, the anti-reflective coating missing off the rear element. But you talk about light scratches on the front element, it depends on how heavy they are. Now, if they're just light scratches, a few here and there, no big deal. Even if they're moderate scratches, you know, a few over in the periphery, still no big issue. Now, you talk about light to moderate scratches on the rear element, that is an issue. Okay, that'll cause problems in your image quality. Now, missing anti-reflective coating spot off the rear element, no big deal. Even some large patches of some AR coating, with the lens hood out, it's an anti-reflective coating. If the lens element is perfectly intact, and you get the lens cheap, it's no big deal. It's nothing you have to worry about, okay? It's an AR coating. It's not part, it's part of the transmission system of the light, of the mechanism, of the totality of the lens, obviously so, but it is not going to affect the actual outcome. So the main thing I really want to condense this down about when it comes to scratches, you need to worry about your rear element, okay, not your front element. That's not to say you don't need to take a look at your front element, look for nicks. And the thing that will affect things is actually missing glass. Typically somebody's bumped something or whatnot on their front lens, you know, a concrete wall or whatever, walking through the door, there's a missing hunk, little tiny hunk out of there. That can cause an issue even on the front element. On the rear element, don't even think of buying it if they've done that. I mean, they've dropped the lens and it hit the concrete. I mean, forget about it. You got missing glass in the rear element, don't buy it. Typically, the issues are rejection of a lens, returning it, or heavier light scratches in the rear element or moderate scratches in the rear element. That's an immediate rejection issue. Some missing anti-reflective coating spot issues due to poor cleaning, not an issue on the rear element. It's just not. Okay? You're talking about it being inside, talking about being attached to your camera. You got it on the back of the light box. All the lens is coming out this way, not in this way. Versus on your front element where the lens is the light's actually coming in. Over here it's just shooting out. So as far as anti-reflective coating spots is part of obviously the transmissional system of the light to the sensor, but if you're missing a couple air coating spots in the rear element, it's no big deal at all. So fungus, crud and dust, look for clarity, look for the haze, which like I said is particularized grease. Very important to check your aperture blades. Also check the click. Make sure it's even and consistent. Okay. Now sometimes, as is the case, people reported, the actual F-mount screws will be loose, so make sure those are tight. Your barrel rings, as I mentioned, check those for smoothness, and the lens overall condition. I don't mind buying an ugly lens as long as the aperture blades are nice and snappy. People see ugly lenses. I mean, eBay, it looks like somebody drugged this across the concrete. Then I'll get the lens in, or I've had a good inspection of it, and it's optically fine. There's no haze, no fungus, and the aperture blades are nice and snappy. I don't give a damn. I mean, I've got plenty of lenses that just look like hell on the outside, or pretty close to hell, but are just optically perfect, and the aperture's fine, and that's no concern. Obviously it affects its resale value, but it has nothing to do with the image quality production, okay, or the light transmission thereof. So remember, also, like I said, check for, like this particular lens does have some oil. This is actually light oil. Now, when you actually start to worry about it, where it's going to cause retardation of the aperture blades, let me stop it down a little bit more so you can see more of the oil, is when you're talking about 3 times as much visible oil as you see here. Now, this can be cleaned. I don't recommend you doing it. It's slightly delicate work. It involves removing the F-mount and removing the aperture assembly and actually soaking the aperture assembly in acetone and then isopropyl alcohol, and then finally doing a relube of it. But it's too much for most people, so please don't do it on your own, okay? Just don't do it. So I hope that made things really simple. These are the things you need to check on buying a used lens off of eBay, Craigslist, blah blah blah. So when you go in person to Craigslist or whatnot, bring a flashlight with you, okay? And don't listen to what anybody else says. Just make reference to this video. It's like, oh no, it takes perfectly. Tell them to shut up. It's like, let me inspect the lens before I buy it. Oh, okay. Remember, moderate dust really isn't an issue, and what you think is moderate dust is my definition of light dust. So don't go worrying about that too much. This is actually rather rare, this, which is a loose element. Now, you'll actually hear this a lot on D-series lenses. Don't concern yourself about it, because the inner focusing barrel on the D-series and a lot of the modern G-series, you'll actually hear this rattle, but it's not a loose element. It's just the actual natural play of the inner barrel and the outer barrel actually just having a little bit of a play tolerance. So that doesn't mean it has a loose element. Now on this, that's not the case. This is actually a loose element. That means that the spanner ring that's holding the secondary element on this lens in is loose. So anyway, thanks for watching. I hope that helped you, because most people do not know how to grade a lens. There are some other finer details, but that basically covers 95% of it. And thank you for watching, okay? Thanks to all you wonderful folks. Another video from the Tattooed Freak photography guy.